Okay, welcome. We're going to do a copy of a drawing by a man named Daniel Huntington from 1881. This is a portrait, half-length portrait. So we're going to begin by placing the head. And notice that we're only going to have about a distance of between 4 and 5 heads to the bottom of the paper. So I'm making the head a little bigger than it needs to be. Just try to picture how much space you need. And it's better to draw it a little smaller than too big. I would say about 5 heads to the bottom of the page. We could double check that. Somebody wants to measure. We've got, let's see. So the first head is like this. 1. Second head should get us near kind of the nipples. The third head should get us near the navel. And the fourth head is going to get us to the area of the greater trochanter. And then the fifth head gets us more or less off the bottom of the page. This second interval is a little long because her chin is raised, but I think you get the idea. So we're going to go first interval to here, little extra space here, third interval, fourth interval, fifth interval. And it's always good to count heads when you're trying to figure out if your drawing's going to fit on the paper. We're going to really try to avoid getting the rib cage stacked directly below the head, because it obviously doesn't. The rib cage is off to one side, kind of like this. It is like weirdly, normally we expect the rib cage to tilt back, but because she's kind of like forward leaning, the rib cage is almost vertical. It is, wait a second, sort of, rib cage is over here. It's not very much tilted, but it's nowhere near being under the mass of the head. You see how it's kicked over to the right? So if we drop a plumb line straight down right here, we end up going sort of through the sternum, and the shoulders are way behind that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that plumb. That's going to direct me to make the sternum out here. Rib cage way over to the right. And the rest of the bean is going to take us down to about here. Remember, this is the trochanter. So we're dealing with something like that. It goes into that, because remember, this is the trochanter. So that's not where we sit. We don't sit right on our trochanters. It's hard to say. That's the difficulty with a clothed figure. But yep. And I'm going to go ahead and think about some basic crating. So we're switching from thinking in terms of round forms to thinking of straight edges. So we've got, remember we like to look for these repeating angles. So here's, this angle repeats at the bottom of the head and also at the bottom of the rib cage right here. And we're learning how to relate those distant forms to each other. And we have a strong series of verticals. See, this is pretty much straight up and down. This is almost vertical back here. And then the arm is a pair of verticals on each arm. So we've got the dress is sticking out a little bit here, and we've got a pair of verticals here, pair of verticals here, and then the vertical in the back. And notice that this angle also repeats. And see this little indent right here? That's where the lower arm starts on this arm, and then it's a little below that point on this arm. I'm pressing a lot harder than you should be, as usual, so you can see what I'm doing here, but try to use your lightest pressure. Oh, yeah. We can... Oh, you want me to erase mine? Okay. Yeah. No, I can get rid of these green lines. We're going to check this angle now. To find how far out that hand comes, it's always a good idea just to draw the angle, and that's going to let me know that I've got to get the hand out here. And to find where the wrist is, I'm going to pull a plumb line from the outside of the head. Goes right through this arm, and the wrist is just a little bit below that. So that puts the wrist about here. And this hand, I made this angle a little too. And I'm just going to block in a very simplified block in for the skirt like this. So we're going to go straight edge, straight edge. And now my drawing's kind of set up. It's like the proportions are about right. I'm seeing that somehow I ended up with too small of a space in here, which is probably due to me underestimating how tightly cinched her corset is. We're not used to seeing people dressed like this. This is how you step out. Go to the clubs. Okay, as you have guessed, we're next going to go right into the details on the face. So the most important angle to get right is probably this one. And that's going to set us up for this one. The angle through the eyes, which is like this, it's about, I would say about 10 degrees from horizontal through the middle of the head, like that. And then this is going to go left of center, like that. And after you have those construction lines, we are going to proceed and take a close look at this face. So your goal is to avoid adding details to this face that you can't see in the original. So I'm going to lighten those construction lines, and I'm going to start with some shadows. I'm not even mapping them first. I'm just sort of going for it with a little bit of little shading. Because if these shapes aren't in the right place, if I use a really light pressure, I'll be able to see right away how to fix it. Let me adjust my camera so that. So we want to make sure to very lightly indicate, just with a little dark, which way she's looking. We're starting off with only these really faint searching lines, trying to get it to look a little bit like her, and mainly, remember our biggest challenge is to scale this face appropriately for the body. She's got this kind of long shadow under her nose, a softer shadow under the chin. And we're going to mass in the shapes of the hair. We are trying to copy the line quality of this drawing, so don't just freestyle it in your own technique. Try to use this very light touch. And notice because of the tilt of the head, the angle of the jaw on the right is a little lower than it is on the left. Yep. So notice that my face is looking a little bit smallish. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to bump the eyes up like a millimeter. And it's important that you see how I make these revisions, because you're all going to have your own revisions to make. You see how the scale of the head feels a little more appropriate with the eyes raised, and it really was like maybe 1 or 2 millimeter change, but that's the type of change that actually makes a difference when you're drawing a head and trying to scale it to a body that's already there. So I'm going to make sure my pencil point is good, and I'm going to go ahead and get a little more definite on some of these forms. This is the first time I'm pressing just a little bit harder. You can see how this little bit of shading underneath the eye on this side helps to kind of bring out the lower lid. Okay, we are resuming the recording of this lesson. I'm just trying to get a little more detail into my eyes. This lesson is supposed to be appropriate for children, Abby, so. Okay. I don't think the people at home can hear what's on that side of the... Oh, I have a lot of subscribers. I don't know. You know, I don't promote my channel the way I should. Okay, so we're going to go into the nose now. Look at that long shadow on the nose. And a much more subtle definition of the nose on this side. See that? It's like barely there. And a classic, this is sort of a large mouth with a classic Cupid's bow. Yes, Abby. Okay, we all drawing out there? Notice the darkest shadow on the face is going to be right inside of the eyes and under the nose. Okay, we are going to move down into the neck now. Look at how the neck overlaps the back shoulder. And let's pay attention to how the rib cage is represented. I mean the pit of the neck. Some of you still remember what your elementary teachers taught you about not using erasers, and you need to just erase. Like if this contour looks too dark to me, I can just touch it with my eraser and lighten it up. And that's what you should do. Yeah, you don't need to scrub it off all the way, just lighten it. You can see this artist was probably right-handed. Are you right-handed? No, I'm left-handed. And I'm going to very, very faintly indicate the beginning of this dress, which is obviously going to be lightened, created mostly with white. So I made the neck a little too long, so I'm just going to lift that shoulder up a little bit on the left. Okay, so we've done most of the hard parts, so I'm going to zoom out now a lot more. Now, I'm going to get her back. She's got a very round back. Comes all the way to here. And the top of her neckline goes straight across about here. It curves up and around behind the neck. And then there's a little crease right here which represents kind of the center line of the bust. And you'll notice that if you can get the proportions set up and you can get the features into more or less the correct shape, the rest of it tends to go very smoothly. So this is the curve of the bicep. So notice this is some right-handed shading along the front of the corset here, which I'm even going to bring back a little further. A lot of you have trouble tapering from the elbow to the wrist. Look at how clearly represented this is. You see how this muscle group tapers down to tendon at about here, and the wrist gets very narrow. And then the thumb, make sure you make the hand long enough. Look at how long the thumb is from, it starts at the wrist and goes all the way to the tip of the thumb. It's almost the entire length of the hand to here. And then we can zoom in a little bit and look at the structure here, but it's very, look at the simplicity of this hand. It's just this foreshortened finger joint. Okay. So we have this one little foreshortened finger, and the third finger is barely showing, and the last finger is just a knuckle. But look at the subtlety here of the shadow mapping. You see how this shading curves around the knuckles, as simple as it is, and sort of brings out the form of the knuckles. So we end up with something like that. I brought the thumb to a little too much of a point. I'm going to round that off. And there's a very faint indication of the thumbnail. And a slight flattening right here as the wrist hits the dress. And a little bit of shading, cast shadow on the dress. This other hand is also represented, but even more economically. Like that. And let's all try to do close copying of the shading on this arm. So I'm doing first shading in a right-handed direction like this. And then the second shading curves around the form like this, cross hatches a little bit. And let's all try to actually copy that line by line, what that looks like. So the back of her corset also squeezes in a little right behind the arm here. And now I'm just going to take this blocking in that I did before and turn it into the kind of graceful, flowy contour lines that I actually see in front of me. But I better clean up the bottom half of the construction lines first. Okay, mostly all we have left to do is the white. So let's zoom in so we can see where the white gets placed. There's actually none on the face. Yeah, I so much want to put highlights on the face, but there aren't any. There's a little bit of halftone here and here. And so our main lights are on the dress. So let's do. Yeah, this art is showing a tremendous amount of restraint with the highlights. That's something I actually learned in school was, and I don't follow this rule too much myself, but you're really supposed to do almost all the work with dark and just barely touch the drawing with your highlighting. I tend to go a little too hard on the highlights, as do most people, just because it's so fun. So your drawing's probably fine, but I'm feeling like a little unhappy about the gaze. I need to fix the gaze.
Adam, has anybody ever called you Adam Dorito?
So I think that corrected the gaze a little bit, a little more of a up and to the right. Still probably not perfect, but that's the best I have time for in today's lesson. Thank you for your attention. And I'm going to try one more time on this iris. It's important to realize that we don't always get it right the first time, and it's okay to keep trying. And that feels a little better to me. You see this very subtle change in the placement of the iris. And I think that's a little more true to the spirit of the original drawing. It's a little humbling, to be honest, to do a copy like this by a drawing I've never heard of, and just recognize the kind of amazing ability of this artist to capture something with such simplicity and grace, and to do it obviously from a live model in what doesn't appear to have been a tremendously long session. So there we go. And that will do it for today's drawing by Daniel Huntington. Thank you.